Interesting.
Yeah, this is Hannibal here from the HannibalTV.com. Wearing a shirt that I was just given by a fan of this channel, Body Bag. Maybe he'll send one to John too.
Yeah, I'll take one.
It's the Hulksters on there with the Warrior. And of course, John has that Hulk Hogan podcast that we recently put on here with with Travis Orndorff's on an episode. But we're here to talk about this Ted Hart Dangerous Breed 3-part documentary, which superstar Billy Graham's webmaster Mike was kind enough to download it and send it to me because it's not available in Canada. But I know you saw it
Yep.
on Peacock. It was released yesterday. What were your thoughts overall?
It was actually pretty good, just as far as like how well done it was and how much time and effort was put into it. I mean, obviously over 10 years. But the thing that I just had a problem with was the director, the guy Freddie Crutch or whatever, however you pronounce his name. I feel like he liked being on TV and liked being a part of this more than Teddy,
I was going to say that. That was
right?
one thing that bothered me. He had almost as much TV time, if not more, than Ted. And he
Yes.
really paints himself out to be a saint in this. And I
That
don't
was the
know.
one thing that kept bothering me throughout the whole thing because he's like, oh, Teddy was like obsessed with being recorded. He loved being recorded. He wants to be on TV. The guy was recording himself. He goes back and he analyzes recording himself by recording himself, watching himself. So it's like, man, this guy, like, he's loving the limelight. He's loving that he's basically the focal point, even though Teddy's supposed to be the focal point. I feel like that took away from it a bit. He was like just obsessed. I guess you could say a little bit of an egomaniac. He was just obsessed with being on film and being on camera. That it was almost like his story more than Teddy's story. It's like, what did he think about what Teddy was going through? It was very strange. It's like, I don't know. I guess you felt
Yeah.
the same way.
And there was some sneaky stuff in there when he's like, "Oh, Ted, let's get away for a bit." But then they're still filming them from a distance, recording them on the audio. So that's just trickery. I wouldn't do that to somebody.
But I noticed that Teddy kind of caught on to it because Teddy goes, "Oh, what is this? Some sort of trick here? You're trying to get me to talk about certain things." And he goes, "I thought this was a documentary about me. Now you're going into your own story because you're trying to get famous, because you're trying to,
Yeah.
basically find Samantha Fiddler as a missing person." So to me, I know I just had a problem with the guy Freddie because I was like, "Man, this guy is just a." Like he's saying, "Oh, Teddy's an egomaniac. Teddy loves to be filmed. Teddy this, Teddy that." He was the one that was wanting to be filmed the whole time. It was nuts.
And I didn't like at the end how he like made it like case closed on Teddy. This is the end of Teddy. But it's like, if anything, this is going to get people to talk about him again, which it is, because he had been off the radar. And also, I didn't like at the point where he's like, "I'm only doing this for Teddy to be brought to justice." But he was legally exonerated of that case, so he wasn't brought to justice at all. So stop acting like you were a saint doing that. They also made it seem in the one episode like he was running away from the cops, but in the other, the head of the prostitutes or whatever, however she made her money, from what I understand, she ran a prostitute business,
Escort service, yeah.
escort
Yeah.
service. She paid for him to go to Texas, and then they filed it when he was in Texas. And we know throughout the whole thing, and I know Ted personally, he never has any money. He could probably only come back if the producer paid the money for him to come back, and then the
Right.
producer doesn't even bail him out of jail. And I've also heard through my contacts in Calgary that the other woman he was dating was actually an escort as well. The other one that was making those allegations against him. So I don't know how you thought about their credibility. I don't doubt that maybe some stuff went on there, but I don't think those two are as innocent as they play either.
Right. That was my only problem, like with them, as far as like I believe their story and what they were saying, but as far as their credibility, and obviously in court, like Teddy Hart's father said with the lawyer just sliced and diced him because he was saying that basically, we had a good lawyer, they didn't, but the lawyer brought out stuff and made the credibility not look so good. Obviously, the woman, Faye, has an escort service. She does, whatever she's doing. If it's above board, if it's not above board, I don't know, and I don't care. But obviously, their credibility was hurt. The other girl even lied to Freddie, the director, was saying, "Oh, we were a longtime boyfriend and girlfriend," and then she told him after the fact, "Oh no, we just met, and I just wanted to be famous. I just wanted to be on camera." So her credibility to me was shot immediately, and she's bringing out a notebook and saying she's got all this info on Teddy and all this other stuff. But why were you lying to the director to begin with to get in the film? So uh, I hate that kind of stuff because he said, she said, but then the credibility of the girls, which you want to believe the women, but their credibility was shot by them admitting they were lying to the director. So you never know what to believe. And obviously, Teddy, he did some stuff, and he's not a saint by any stretch of the imagination. And I'm not saying that he was, but to me, the girl's credibility is just completely killed when they keep lying about stuff. So were they lying about Teddy? I don't know. It's just they lied to the director about their relationship with Teddy. So not good.
Yeah, and again, you got to go by what the legal system did. They got him off, and that, I guess, it explains some things at least, because in that Rolling Stone article, they were saying that Teddy owned an escort service and breeded pets, but it actually said that was actually her house,
Yes.
the one that owned the escort services, and she actually bred the cats. And I'm sure part of the reason she wanted to be with Teddy was because he had this documentary crew following him and stuff. And after it probably appeared that there was not going to be a documentary released or a reality show, she's probably like, okay, I've had enough. I want this guy out of my house. Because even
Right.
the story doesn't make sense. He had a booking in Texas, so she had to pay $3,000 for him to go to Texas. Why isn't the booker paying for him to go to Texas?
Right.
There's some weird stuff in that story.
Right. That was weird. That kind of didn't make sense either. It's like she has to pay for this. She wants to get him out of the life, but they were booking him in Texas. So technically speaking, the promoter would fly him out and he'd be booked. So to me, there was a hole in that story too. I was just like confused by that. That just didn't kind of make too much sense either. But there was some filming of her and Teddy was saying he mentally raped her and all this other stuff. So I don't, obviously he's nutty as hell, obviously, but I don't know what that means or what that happened there between them, and obviously there's more to meets the eye. But if the director was saying that he's filming him constantly, but he didn't see any physical stuff and physical altercations, that's a weird thing to me too. Might be a red flag too, because he's saying crazy stuff like mentally raping her and stupid shit like that. I mean, that's just insane to say that and to treat her like that and to demean her. But then she was saying the physical stuff, and then the director came back and said, "Well, we didn't see any of that. You were filming him basically 24/7." So I don't, you never know what to believe. I mean, they're all nuts, to be honest. The director included. I mean, they're all nuts.
Yeah, I don't think the director, if he's going to be around those type of characters for what he says 10 years, is probably as innocent as he makes himself out to be. The one point where he jokes about Teddy didn't have any money for gas and maybe I should pay him the $500 he's asking. Well, obviously the director sold this to Peacock or was involved in the thing, so he ended up making money.
Yep.
I had confirmation through Jack Kilby today, who is, I guess, actually going to interview Ted about what he thinks about this, that Ted wasn't paid a cent for any of this. So all
Wow.
this was hoping he did this thinking he was going to get a reality show and make money. But in the end, it's like a piece to make him look bad. And the other guy makes all the money.
First of all, when he's sitting in the car and they're filming that, obviously Freddie, who loves to be filmed, the egomaniac that he is, but he's filming him. He goes, "Oh man," he goes, "I don't know what's going on. My mom is paying for this, and this is an unprofessional shoot." He keeps throwing out there that this isn't professional. Like, you're saying that stuff, you're saying it's not professional, but that obviously means that you are very conscious of it, that you should be paying this guy, because he even mentions, "Should I be paying this guy? Oh, I should probably be paying for his gas. Should probably be doing that." Yeah, if you're filming the guy, you should be paying him. I mean, he's a part of the service, and you're trying to sell it to somebody else, and you're making money off of it. So he kept using that as a crutch that he's unprofessional, he doesn't know what he's doing. But then he also mentioned he spent his whole life in being a filmmaker, so he knows that he's pretending he's naive, but he knows that he should have been paying Teddy, and that part was, again, a little shady too. And he's kind of admitting it. They're like, "Oh, I should be paying for this guy's gas." Yeah, you should be. I know somebody that was doing the documentary, another wrestler. The guys that were doing the documentary, they paid him up front. They paid for his gas when he had to go place. If he had to stay in a hotel or if they were filming off location, they paid for everything. It seemed like this guy was kind of leeching off of Teddy and not giving him anything to be filmed. And then he sells it to Peacock, and now WWE is a part, obviously, of it as well. They're part producer of it for God knows what reason. I have no idea, but they are. So I mean, obviously there was money to be made, and Teddy didn't get any of it, which is insane. You could say, "Oh, Teddy doesn't deserve it," but he's the only reason the story is out there. The only reason there is a story. Only reason there is a documentary. Only reason the guy was filming. So obviously Teddy should get paid. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, and the one point that he brings up there, it is true. Ted always manages to have like these fancy cars and live in big houses and stuff, but he actually never has any money or any gas. But it's because he does go from person to person. But I don't know what his intentions always are. But in my knowledge of him, other than wrestling, he's never really had a job. I know, for instance, the house tour that he did in Philadelphia with me that a lot of fans have seen on here. That was a fan of his. These fans like invite him to live with them for periods of time because he's part of the Hart family and it makes them look cool or whatever.
Yep.
And then the relationships end. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. But I did agree with that part of it. It's kind of funny, but I did find later in the show it was funny because it came out that Bill guy paid for the one sports car, and then in the end they're making it seem like Ted stole the Samantha Fiddler's sports car, but the truth is Bill owned it, and they were
Yep.
keeping it in Mexico and not making the payments on it.
Yep, the guy Bill again, another guy he kind of mooched off of a bit. Bill got him out of jail. Bill got him a Jaguar. Bill got him a car. All this stuff with this guy Bill, but it
For the
seems
boob
like
job.
yeah, he paid for Samantha's boob job. It just seemed like the guy Bill was obviously being used to a certain extent too from Teddy and the crew, which is not good at all either. But to me, it's like one person to the next, and he finds the next person. Like Faye was one person who had the money, then Bill was the next, and he kind of goes on and moves to the next person. But you're right; it's like he doesn't have any money on his own, and these places that he kind of lives at, he takes over and he puts up the Tupac posters and the Kevin Nash T-shirts. It's almost like the teenager bedroom kind of thing going on with the weed paraphernalia everywhere. But he takes the place and he puts it and he makes it his own.
Yeah, and I do know that he did also have money coming from the wrestling students, and I do have to agree with that because um for instance, like I've had that experience as well. Like for Matt Rats, it was supposed to be 2 weeks of training before the Matt Rats first match. It was 2 days. And I've seen various people come to Calgary that have paid him money
Wow.
and they end up just being his butler for a period of time.
Yeah, and
Just
they're feeding the cats. Yeah.
yeah, and doing like random stuff here and there. But some of them would actually like. I remember this one guy from Louisiana, like in the early 2000s, when I would hang out with Ted. He came from Louisiana to Calgary for 3 months and just ended up going broke because
Wow.
he never really trained that much and just ended up running errands and stuff. So it's kind of funny, but that is one way.
Yeah.
You know what? There are some people he did train in his younger days. I guess it just depends what he has going on. But I do know that story, those type of stories also happen from my
Yeah.
own experience.
The one guy was saying that he never stepped in the ring. He never did anything as far as the ring. He ended up feeding the cats and doing errands the whole time. So obviously he's taking these guys' money. He's not really training them. And that ring didn't look up to code either. I mean, that didn't look like a great ring. I was talking to Dr. Tom. I was at JPWA. They have a beautiful 20 by 20 ring. I mean, a nice setup and everything. That ring was nothing like that. That looked like a 12 by 12 dump with the ropes falling off of it.
Yeah, that was. I don't know if I trust the documentary maker though. Again, because he's going to make the shots that want to go around his narrative. The other thing I didn't like though about this Samantha Fiddler, I do think one thing if people watch till episode 3, they do kind of clear him on this Samantha Fiddler
Right.
thing because there was a period of time where they were broken up, and she was basically a vagrant and went back to stripping. And then they're like, oh, by the end, she's a stripper. It's like she started as a stripper. And then, so she basically ended where she started. And I
Yep.
think Indigenous people, at least in Canada, it's actually easier to cross borders than in the US. But I know they keep making a big deal about, oh, he had her passport. She couldn't go back to Canada. You actually cannot deny a Canadian citizen access into their own country. If she had gone to the border, sure, they would have held her for a while, but eventually she would have been able to prove through family members or whatever that she was Canadian. They're not going to be like, no, you have no ID. You're
Yep.
screwed. People lose their ID all the time.
So the problem that I had with that too. So the guy Freddie, the director, is totally painting Teddy as kidnapping her, murdering her is essentially what he's saying. That's the whole time. That's what he's building up to. He's going to bring Teddy to justice. All this other stuff. But then all I had to do, I go to cagematch.net, great resource. I love that site. I love going on there. Oh, and then I go to YouTube. He's got a match on the 19th when she's in jail and gets released from jail, and it's in California. And he's pumping up like, "Oh, Teddy can't remember. Teddy's lying." The guy is obviously nuts. I mean, he's Teddy Hart is crazy. He doesn't remember where he wrestled. Oh, he said it was Mexico, but it's really California. Does it matter where he said it was? He's nuts. He doesn't remember. He probably can't even remember yesterday. He's high all the time.
Believe that. One other quick point I'll just mention about that: he is not computer literate and also uses other people's cell phones most of the time because he can't afford his own cell phone. Someone will either buy him one for a short period or he'll use the one that he lives with. He has smoked a lot of weed, so I don't think when he says he doesn't remember the dates, like this is just something a guy like Ted doesn't pay any attention to. So I do believe that that part was legitimate.
Yeah, but they're playing. Oh, he's lying. He's lying. He's lying. Well, if you look up the facts, he could be lying all he wants, and it's not really a lie. Which the director kept saying he was lying. He just literally couldn't remember. He's high. He's stoned. He's nuts. I mean, whatever you want to say. I mean, Teddy Hart is a loose cannon. He wasn't there. So like the whole documentary is building up like, oh, I thought it was going to be this crazy wrestler who's a part of the Hart family and he has cats and all this other crazy shit that they were saying about Teddy, and he's high all the time and he's nuts and he's beating these women, he kidnaps women and all sorts of stuff. And then he's like, okay, part of this missing persons case, the whole thing was predicated that he did it. So you think like, oh, he must have been in Florida at the time. He wasn't even close to Florida at the time. He was wrestling in California. So like before I even watched it, I looked it up to match the dates, and I was like, okay, let's see what this guy makes out of this show that he's totally trying to say that Teddy Hart murdered Fiddler, Samantha Fiddler, and why she's missing. Oh, wait a second, he's in on the other side of the country. Couldn't be further away from Florida than California as far as being in the continental U.S. So like what's the point? You're bringing him to justice. What is he guilty of as far as Samantha Fiddler? He was guilty of nothing. And the whole thing was predicated. He murdered her and got rid of her and all this other stuff. And they even used clips of earlier on when he goes, "Oh, I can kill people and I can get rid of people," and they edited that in to make it seem like that's what he was up to.
And he
Well, it was
can't.
weird.
I actually know Ted, and that's just he cuts promos all the time. And yes, that's a dumb thing to say, but fuck, Ted Hart cannot do that, especially at this point in life. But also about that girl, like when he's done with people, like I think at one point he thought he could actually make money off of her.
Yes,
It was
yes.
probably true. She couldn't wrestle. They also made it seem like the wrestling community didn't do enough. She went to 2 training sessions or something. It's not like she was an actual wrestler. Maybe she walked him out to the ring in Alberta 3 or 4 times. Nobody knew who she was. So it's not like they made it the Rolling Stone guys like, well, she was indigenous and the wrestling community didn't really acknowledge this when it happened. And it may have had to do with the history of, of, of the way they've treated indigenous wrestlers, but she wasn't a wrestler. She did a couple of training sessions. And also for the Team Vision Dojo, uh, it's common all around the world, those wrestling custom videos. Selena does them, De La Renta. They have them in Montreal. They have them everywhere. People pay money
Yeah, Ricochet has done them. Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of people that do them. Yeah,
Yeah, so like that's just a way for independent wrestlers to make money. That's not like a thing that is only Team Vision Dojo that does.
but Chase and Rance, shady dude, obviously terrible. If you just look him up, if you haven't looked him up, I know people could say, "Oh, Teddy Hart should keep better friends or whatever," but obviously that's probably not a good place to send Samantha or be around. I don't know what happened, with his past, but obviously he's got a very, very checkered and shady past. Maybe not the best place to go to even be Teddy, maybe to even be hanging out. But with
Yeah,
Teddy and her, he left her in Florida and he went to California or whatever. He went to wrestle. He was done with her. And then he was dating that girl Machiko again. You know what I mean? So I mean, he was done with her at that point. So for them to kind of put him in that group, but I mean, obviously the Chase and Rance thing is one thing that's just totally crazy, but also think about that. That one guy was a videographer, right? And he's a landscaper, and he's working for Team Vision Dojo. I don't know if that's like the greatest jobs to be in or the greatest spot. That was just like wow, landscaper, videographer for Team Vision Dojo. It's like, oh man, oh,
and
that's
he
rough.
helped get her that woman hooked up with another
Yeah,
place to
yeah.
stay where she apparently went nuts, and they kicked her out of that house.
Yeah, she was throwing plates, and she broke up with the not broke up, but she ended her friendship with the girl,
Yeah,
the younger Spanish girl. Yeah, so that was another thing too, where it's like, well, what was going on with her mentally? Because they said she went to the hospital, she wouldn't leave the hospital, so maybe she had some mental health issues, and the hospital wasn't doing what they could do, and then for some reason the hospital calls the police and gets her arrested, and then she gets obviously gets out of jail, but then gets arrested again. So I don't know what was going on. Maybe there was some other mental health issues going on. I know Teddy was saying she was on drugs and all this other stuff, and I don't know what's true and what's not, but there seems to be something else underneath the surface as far as what was going on with the girl, because the director wasn't saying anything. He's like, oh, she needed a passport and they wouldn't give her a passport, and she wanted an ID, but they were kind of skirting around the issue. There was something else going on there that this director who was out for justice and all this other stuff. Well, instead of being out for justice, why don't you help this poor girl that you're filming for all these years? And oh, she goes missing, and the only reason you even care to do the story was, oh man, I could sell this to Peacock. I'll make it a true crime. True crime is hot right now. I'll make Teddy Hart look like he's a killer and a murderer. It's just so shady. Like, how come this guy Freddie acted like he's some sort of saint? How come he's not trying to help the girl? You know what I mean? Obviously, there was something going on there. He said, "Oh, she was arrested twice." Well, why didn't you help her? Why did you try to help her?
yeah, and they I forget how you pronounce her name. I've interviewed her. I've met her too in Texas. I don't know if it's
Machiko?
Machiko. Yeah, she is a nice person, but like he did capture the one argument they had on tape. But it's like that happened. So what did you do about it? You still filmed them for years.
Yeah.
After
Yep.
that, you didn't ask her help, and then she went back with him after that.
Yeah.
So and then I interviewed her, and it wasn't even brought up. And when someone told me after she was Ted Hart's girlfriend, I asked her about that, and she said she didn't want to talk about it. So maybe only if I don't know what the Peacock budget was for her to come out, but I know she was part of the speaking out thing too.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Um,
And obviously, if, you got to believe her that all that stuff's true. So, I mean, Teddy's obviously got mental health issues too,
oh, I
and
believe
obviously
he used her 100%.
and he used that girl definitely, and obviously he saw whatever. He didn't even care. Remember, she was going to go and it's with him at one point. You could tell he didn't give two shits about her. He was just kind of using her. So, I mean, I feel bad for that girl Machiko, but it's like Samantha
That,
Fiddler. I meant
that
like,
was another red flag though too. Like she can't get into Canada.
well,
Like
what happened though? She got arrested for something, right? Prior in the
yeah,
states.
they weren't really clear about it. So again, but yeah, that did show like he doesn't even care that she flew all
Yeah,
the way there.
yeah, and he didn't care about the cat either because she was
Yeah.
good enough to take in the cat. He didn't care about Mister Money or whatever, and he was saying that he's a cat lover.
The other
Um,
thing is he has a kid, and like when they brought up that he was good with the girls' kids and stuff, it's like, well, he does actually have a kid, which I'm
yeah,
surprised.
I was going to ask you about that when obviously now, like when we're going to get into that, but how come they didn't mention his son? Do you have any idea
It
why
was
they wouldn't
he did
mention that?
say yeah he did he mentioned Kim. who was the woman that he had a kid with. And I think at some point he mentioned that that was my baby mama or something. But I was surprised they never delved into that, because I remember in Matt Rats, the kid was fairly newborn, and he was talking that this was going to be the youngest the wrestler ever, and he was going to start trading it from the time it walked. But from what I understand, the parents ended up raising the kid.
Yeah, Georgia and Mr. Annis. Yeah, right. They raised the kid.
Yeah. And I'll tell you a funny story. I only ever talked to BJ Ennis once the whole time I was there. Ted needed, and I really didn't have much money this time. I gave him like $500 or $600 towards my training. The first time I went, when I actually ran out of money, I came back later for the dungeon, but this was like just after the Mat Rats time. And he's like, yeah, and this includes you can train at my dad's gym, because his dad used to have a gym in downtown Calgary. And I remember I trained there like 5 or 6 times, and the dad approached me and said, you can't train here unless you buy a membership. And I was like, tell him about the thing with Ted. And he's like, no, Ted's wrestling school is his own thing. You got to buy a membership if you could train here. So I always felt like the dad was a bit of an asshole for that. But obviously they sold that gym, which at the time was in like a rundown section of Calgary, and they used to live on top of the gym through Ted's whole childhood. And then I guess when they sold the property, the real estate in Calgary was so good, they moved to wherever that new place is.
Yeah, that was a huge house. Yeah. Yeah. So as far as Teddy is concerned, his brother dies at a young age, and they went into this a little bit, but to me, this is a big part of the story. And I'm not making excuses for the guy at all, but his brother at a very young age has this flesh eating disease. Shockingly, ends up dying. He obviously was his best friend. He stayed in the same room as him. There is a big issue there that either was never dealt with or what. But the brother's death like ruined Teddy Hart's life if you think about it, because he never got that corrected. Obviously, he had mental health. I think he's just nuts anyway, but he never got that kind of issue. Never talked about that issue apparently with somebody, because that just must be eating him alive still to this day. That his brother, who he was so close to at a young age, was dead, because I know obviously that's why he probably didn't want to raise his own son, because of the brother. So
yeah, I'll tell you. Yeah, that was the story, because they did catch him talking about he used to say Owen Hart was an alien and stuff. And again, whatever. I listen to a lot of stuff. He's entitled to his own theories, and I'm not like making fun of him for this. I actually like listening to Ted's anecdotes, which is one of the reasons I did hang out with him for a while. And he told me that he felt that his brother was reincarnated into his son, and that's why it was his parents' responsibility to
why he doesn't raise them, right? Yeah. Which is nutty, but I mean, I guess that's what he thinks.
Yeah, that's what he thought at that time, anyways, which would have been sometime in the 2001 to 2004 range when I used to hang out with him. But
the only thing about that is, obviously you could tell the parents are still, because as soon as they started talking about his brother, I mean, they were tearing up with an instant. I mean, and God, that was 30 years ago, whatever it was. So the brother's death, like Johnny Max, it messed him up big time. It's still messing up the Disco Inferno's brother. Yes. That's not the first time I've heard that, by the way. But I think that the parents are still dealing with the brother's death too. I mean, it really, obviously, I mean, you never get over that, the death of your kid. I mean, that's just horrible and insane. Obviously, death of his brother definitely screwed him up big time. But as far as Teddy is concerned, I don't want to say like that's an excuse or whatever, but that's a part of why he is the way he is, to me anyway, and how nutty he is. And obviously smokes way too much weed, and he's totally irresponsible, and all that other stuff true too. But to me, the brother, that's a big part of the story. And when they talked to the dad, the BJ Annis, and they were talking about the woman Faye, he said we had a better lawyer, and he's like, you gotta, which is kind of a red flag there. He said,
I don't know if this is true, but somebody told me that Bill guy was the lawyer. And because I asked one of my friends in Calgary who this Bill guy was. and they thought he was the lawyer. But I'm gonna have to try and get clarification on that because I said, really, this guy's a lawyer? Because they made Bill out to be a
Nut
drunk.
job. Yeah. Yeah, like he's got his hand all busted up in front of his little kid, and he's riding go-karts and all that other shit, and getting all messed up. But BJ Annis says,
Typical person from Edmonton, by the way. That guy, Edmonton.
uh,
No offense to you people, but it's a weird city in some ways, and like that guy fits in perfectly from Edmonton. I think that
but did you notice BJ Annis said, he goes, because we have to protect our own, meaning that he thinks Teddy was guilty of something. He said that we had a better lawyer, sorry to Faye, but that we did what we had to do, and we had to rip apart your credibility because we have to protect our own, we have to protect our son, and that's just what you do as family. So to me, though, there was a little bit of admission of guilt that Teddy did something and did something wrong, and his dad was kind of admitting it. They didn't really touch upon that too much on the documentary either. They're obviously too busy saying he was a murderer and everything else to delve into that. But obviously, the father was saying he was guilty of something.
yeah, I did notice that, and I was surprised that actually the father would say that on camera because the father is a very smart guy and good businessman from everything I've heard about the father. But but yeah, again though, if that house looked like it was a decent sized house, she ran an escort agency. She had all these cats that were being bred and sold or
Well,
what.
remember they were filming her with the money bag, and she had all those hundreds and all those 20s, and she's like, "Look,"
So
she goes,
where's
"I'm a
her
millionaire."
lawyer money?
Yeah, yeah.
Where's her lawyer money? Because like she must have some money, unless
I
Ted just took it all. But didn't the case happen a few years after?
Yeah, yeah. I don't know that was that stuff is weird, and the stuff with Teddy and Ring of Honor. I was actually at that show. I wanted to touch on that for a second. I was at that show, and that was crazy because you had the melee, the scramble cage melee, if you will. They had platforms on top of each corner of the cage, so the guys could actually stand and not have to worry about falling and all this other stuff. So they could actually do crazy flips and stuff off of the top of the cage onto the floor. And Jack Evans does a crazy shit. He's awesome, but I mean, he does some crazy shit. But then Teddy, all of a sudden, this just shows something was going on with him mentally. Even back in 2003, he starts doing flips after flips after flips. Has nothing to do with the match. He just keeps doing flips. I remember me and my buddy were like, "What the fuck is he doing? What is going on? He's nuts! Like, why is this guy just doing flips?" Then he starts throwing up all over the place because he's doing all these crazy flips off the top of the cage. Then he goes to the back. He gets his stuff thrown out of the locker room. He gets thrown out of the locker room. You could even tell back then, like, what is going on with this guy? He's just he's nuts. Like, what the
What
fuck
was
is he
the
doing?
atmosphere in the building that day for you guys?
Great for a Ring of Honor show. I mean, Ring of Honor was hot at that point. 03. It was awesome, but it was like everyone was like going nuts for the high spots and going nuts for Jack Evans, and then for the first spot that he did, people were going nuts. But then after that, everyone's like, "What?" Like they were just in shock. They didn't know what was going on, but everybody knew like this isn't a part of like the match. Why is this guy doing flips by himself? So great atmosphere. And then when he starts doing that crazy shit, people are like, "What the fuck is going on? Like, what is wrong with this guy?" And obviously, we heard afterwards through the forums and stuff that he got thrown out of the locker room.
Yeah, that was pretty bad. And the one fan on there brought up that the woman was in Florida and Mexico with three kids at home, which does sound a little weird, especially after Mexico doesn't run out. If your parents are taking care of the kids, couldn't you find someone that has a phone and call your parents and say, "Hey, I don't have any money. I can't work. I don't have a passport. Could you get things sorted out to get me back?"
Yeah, and I'm
From
surprised because the sister was trying to reach out to her, and why. I'm just curious, like why Samantha didn't reach back out to the sister or the parents. And obviously, she's checking on her kids, but it's like, why didn't she say like, "Hey, it's not working out here. I need to go back, and I need to go home." I don't know the answer to that. Maybe there's something keeping her there. I know people say it was the passport. He stole her passport, but like you're saying, there's ways around it. There's ways you can't keep her out of her own country. But it seems like she was embedded in Florida for some reason and not wanting to go back to Canada. That's something in the story I would have loved to got more info on. Like, why wasn't the guy Freddie talking about, like, what was she doing down there? Like, I know she was working at the strip club, but like, and the landscaper stuff, and she did some stuff with Team Vision Dojo as far as that stuff was concerned. But like, why did she stay down there? Why wasn't she trying to make her way back home? Why didn't the parents try to get her back home? I don't know. So many questions. Obviously, the sister was pretty young; she couldn't drive down and get her, I guess, at that
The
point. But
sister said she could arrange for a ride, though. She could have arranged for a ride, but she didn't want to do that because of the fucking passport, which makes no sense. Because
right,
she's not legal in the U.S. either. And
right.
without a work visa, you're actually only allowed in the U.S. for 3 months. But she went the opposite direction because isn't Miami further south than
Oh, way
Orlando?
further south. Yeah, so you got Orlando's basically in the middle of the state. Miami's almost in the bottom of the state. I mean, if
Yeah.
you ever been to Florida, nothing is close. I mean,
Oh,
Miami or Orlando to Tampa is like 2 hours. For Christ, I mean, it's like nothing is close. So I think it's maybe 4 hours from Orlando, Miami, but it's a significant difference.
yeah. So clearly she had other stuff going on because I don't know if Ted's ever even been to Miami, but I think you're right. When Ted is through with somebody, particular if they have no money and
He's they're of no use to him. Yeah, he's done using them.
driving
Yeah,
around trying to find a bum,
right.
like
He had no use for her. Yeah, and he stole the car. He stole Bill's car that they were going to use together. So he kind of had no use for her anymore. But obviously, that's the part. And I saw Samantha Fiddler's Army was on Twitter. They're putting like, oh, it was good to get the documentary out there to get some people talking and get the missing case and get the the people online who do actually. There's a lot of people online that do a great job of like finding people and do these missing cases. And I know there was the Delphi murders. There were so many online sleuths and people that were really helping these cases out. So they were saying it's good the documentary came out to get the missing persons case open and try to find her and find out what happened to her. But how come Freddie, the documentarian, wasn't doing any of that? Wouldn't that have been the perfect opportunity for him to do that? And it's felt like it wasn't about that. It was about him and him watching film of her. So like, oh, him getting emotional about her, like pretending he had some sort of connection with her. When to me, he didn't have a connection with her because he wasn't trying to help her at all. It just seemed like a little fugazi to me, a little phony baloney
him
of the
watching
guy.
himself interviewing himself.
Yes, and then, like, pretending to get emotional, "Well, why the hell weren't you trying to help the girl?" "Oh, I feel bad," and, "Oh," and I'm watching this. The whole thing was, "Oh, now I have my story because I have Teddy Hart, and this is gonna be a missing person case, and I'm gonna blame it on him without actually doing any due diligence until way at the end when when any wrestling fan knows, I can just look at Cage Match. I can just look at YouTube and find out where Teddy was at this point, and, oh, wait, he wasn't." And he's trying to explain, like, the nuances of wrestling and stuff, like, what a dope. Like you just look it up. You could see Teddy wasn't there. Your whole premise is shot. So why weren't you trying to help the girl? Your whole premise wasn't to help the girl and wasn't to see Teddy Hart get justice. You felt like your whole premise was just to make yourself famous and to get some money out of this thing that you were shooting for 10 years and turn it into a true crime thing because true crime is hot right now. You're trying to turn it into this missing persons case, but you're not actually trying to help the missing person. Weird,
Yeah,
very
I'd
weird.
I'd love to see his outtakes to see how many times he filmed himself doing that
Right. Yep.
because he seems like the type of person that would have done it a million times.
Yep. And then him like putting all the stuff in the box at the end, like trying to be like, oh, the case closed. I'm done with this case. The girl is still missing. It is no case closed. Like they never found out
Yeah,
what
the
happened
girl's
to her.
still missing. You don't even care. Very
Yeah,
good
like
point.
how is it case closed? Why are you putting all your stuff away and like, oh, this is done and the girl is still missing, dickhead. And I don't mean to be rude to the guy, but it just like it infuriated me. They're like, wait a second, why is the case closed? Why is it's not case closed? The case is very much wide open.
Yeah, case closed because he wanted to bury Teddy, but he didn't get his money shot at the end of Teddy being brought to
The
justice.
real case closed was he finally got to make money after 10 years off this thing because he sold it to Peacock. That's the case closed. Oh, okay, I can get to pay my mom back, and all this equipment I bought, and I never paid Teddy, but hey, at least I made money off of it. Oh, but case closed. Case isn't closed. she's still missing. Her sister it was crying on camera, still missing her, still wanted to find her. Her best friend who you filmed. So like, were you kind of like using these people and trying to get these emotional reactions because it'd be good for Peacock, and that's how you sell to Peacock and NBC, and that's how you get WWE to be producer on board to use these people emotion? Like, why weren't you helping this girl?
Yeah, and at first I thought before I really knew anything about this story, because I'll be honest, I never really paid any attention to it. But I thought that she had just gone missing in Mexico. But the whole point that she actually went missing in Florida,
Yep,
like
right after she was arrested and got released, went
it's
missing. Yep.
like, and then the cops didn't really want to pursue it because obviously with whatever information they had, which who knows what they have and what they don't have, but they don't feel this was a big thing based on whatever information they had on her. So
So the thing to me that gets me is she just gets released from jail. It's in a bad neighborhood, a bad area. She apparently tried to call her sister, and her sister, I guess, didn't get to the phone, or missed the call. She calls back. It's just the generic phone, the generic answer. Do do do. You can't reach this person, and then she goes missing, and that's the end of her. And that's all the documentary. And he's like, "Yep, well, that's the end of it." That's just the beginning of it. What happened after she was released from jail, made the phone call? Where did she go? Who did she see? What happened? Was there cameras around? Like, he didn't give two shits about any of that stuff.
yeah, I agree. And they did also bring up at that particular jail, they let the prisoners out in groups, basically very early in the morning. So you have to assume maybe 4 or 5 in the morning. And
And
then,
God knows what if you got some miscreants in there, if they male, female, whatever, maybe they picked her up and kidnapped her. I mean,
yeah,
to say that it's Teddy Hart's fault, it's not. It wasn't Teddy Hart's fault. Like, why didn't you do some other investigative work and do due diligence and use Peacock and NBC to, or whatever the hell you're selling it to, like, do something to help this girl? Because her leaving the jail, that's the beginning of the case. That's not the end. That's the begin. What happened after that point? And it's almost like, well, this is about dangerous breeds. It's about Teddy Hart. You made it about Samantha Fiddler. That needed to be the rest of the case.
yeah, and they really made her seem very pure throughout the whole thing, even though again she had 3 kids, but was a stripper when they met. And I guess Bill was there when they met.
Yeah.
And like I don't know, a lot of the strippers in Canada, you could actually take home for a certain price. So if
Oh.
I'm not saying that was her type, but like Bill clearly had a lot of money. Like what she sees Ted has a lot of money. Maybe that wasn't it, but
And
clearly
he
the other women were involved in that type of stuff.
and the documentarian, Freddie, he makes the point. He's saying, like, she changed her look. She did look completely different. She had the blonde hair. Was she hiding from somebody? Was she trying to get away? Like, that's like something. Like, let's get some more information about that. Like, why was she really arrested twice? Don't just say, oh, she was arrested, she wouldn't leave the hospital. There's more to it. Like, why was she arrested there? Why was she arrested the second time? How come she went under the transformation and did have a completely different look than before? But then he was saying that that wasn't really her. But then they were showing other pictures of her with red hair, her with black hair. Like, is is that something that you normally do? Like, I would have liked to get some more information about her.
I forgot about that, but yeah, that was a big thing they were showing. She changed her hair to blonde, and they're making it seem like it had to do with Ted, but Ted hadn't seen her for a while at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, it was
Like
months. Yeah.
he's
Yep.
moved on. He went back to
Yep.
the other girl, then milked the other girl for all he could get, then went to wherever he
And
went
she
to.
was down in Polk County, so I mean, she was in a different place altogether, so obviously that had nothing to do with Ted. I would have just loved that they delved deeper into, like, what that meant. Like, he
Yeah.
just kinda mentions it, but where are you going with that? Like, he would mention something, and then it wouldn't go anywhere. If that was strange. I was like, "Okay, can we get some more information?" Like, he didn't do any due diligence to maybe even find out the information of why she changed her look.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions about it. Yeah, there's no doubt Ted has his issues and stuff, but at least one thing out of this is yes, the Samantha Fiddler thing. I'm pretty sure anyone with a little bit of sense to them, he was nowhere in Florida when she was released.
Yeah.
And he,
Yep.
as you said, she was in California. They milked it until the very end of the
Yep.
last episode to let that information out to keep
Yep.
you watching. So if
Yep.
people don't watch till the third episode, they might still hold something to Ted. But I don't think, honestly, after watching all three, this will be necessarily a bad thing for Ted's career because he wasn't getting booked anywhere. I can't remember the last time I've seen that he's wrestled. And
It's been a while. Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, I do think he will probably get more fans out of this. He'll get more haters too. But if he could get on with a company like XPW and maybe keep himself on the straight and narrow.
I saw he's booked for USA Pro Wrestling January 7th in Florida. Lawler and Scott Steiner are headlining, but I saw he's on the show too. So I don't know if it was before this or after or after this, but he's got a booking in Florida in a month and a half.
Yeah, I think that as long as he can keep himself out of trouble, I don't think the big companies will, unless I really don't see that happening because of how corporate they are. But
But can he keep himself out of trouble? It seems like every girl he's with, there's a problem with the girl. I don't remember what the finale was with Maria Manic or whatever
yeah, they
the girl
went
Maria that.
different ways apparently in the
Yeah,
end.
but what happened there? Like they didn't talk about that on the documentary at all. Machiko, I know obviously she had the speaking out stuff, and she came out with stuff. The one escort that said that she knew him forever, but then really just met him. She had a problem. Faye, the wife, had a problem. So obviously, I mean, he's got some deep issues, and obviously he's got problems with women, and obviously using people for money too seems to be something that is out there, and it's
But
probably
honestly,
true.
what could he do for a real job? What could he do? Because as WWE said, they didn't find him coachable. Yeah, I understand how they
That's the thing with him, right? If you really look at his talent and him being signed, he was signed at 18 years old. So obviously they saw the talent was there, and like the guy is one of the most gifted physical wrestlers. If you ever seen him, he's great at submissions. He's great at high flying. He's got an awesome punch. His promos are nutty as hell, but like they're interesting. Just you're just like enthralled by what the hell is he talking about? Like he had all the tools, just couldn't keep together. Like you said, WWE said he wasn't coachable. I was talking to a wrestler today. They were saying he's freaking nuts. Like he was hard to deal with at WWE. Obviously, when he was in TNA, he's getting in fights with guys. Obviously, Punk being one of those guys he got in a fight with, but he's gotten in a fight with a bunch of guys. He had problems with a bunch of guys. I was asking Jack Evans. He said he hadn't really talked to him, but he was kind of in and out, that he was kind of nutty. I was talking to TJ Wilson. He was saying they were kind of in and out with the relationship. He was kind of nutty. So he had all the tools. Mentally, he couldn't do it. I mean, he could have been a WWE superstar for years. He could have been one. He had all the tools.
I'm surprised they never. I actually went out with his one sister very briefly, but um, Jack dated and was like the boyfriend of his other sister, Annie, for a long time. I only went out with the one sister one night, by the way, because I had a girlfriend at the time and I shouldn't have done it. But, and she actually came to the Hart house, and the sister lived in the basement of the Hart house. And
Wow.
she came to find me, and my car was there. And the Hart family stuck up for me that day, and they said they didn't know where I was.
Nice. Good
But
job.
but yeah, I'm surprised they didn't interview the sisters because I would have liked to have. I haven't heard anything from them. I think they're both married or something now, and the one
Yeah, I
lives.
wonder what they think of Teddy. What do they think of their brother? I would love to know that.
Well, because Annie, the younger one that went out with Jack, she was all, back when I was hanging out with Ted. She was always also with Ted. She was part of Ted's. That's the other thing that is true about this. He always has a group. There's always some trainees. There's always various women.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's his sister, or just like random
But
women that he
it
meets.
seems like Jack Evans grew up and Teddy stayed kind of where he was, and he just that immature single, I'm going to use people lifestyle. When Jack has got a family, he's wrestling, he's got his own house. I mean, he kind of moved on. T.J. Wilson, same thing. I mean, they're and David Hart Smith. I mean, you're at a certain level. Let's grow up a little bit and move on, and let's be professionals and try to make it. Obviously, Jack Evans, ROH, AEW. I mean, GCW. I mean, working all these other places. T.J. Wilson was working WWE, and David Hart Smith was working WWE. So he, I don't know, he couldn't grow up, I guess, for whatever reason. He mentally couldn't handle being a WWE superstar or a professional.
Yeah, I don't think that. I just think it's just discipline or like having to report to someone. He could maybe do it for a short period of time or one offs, but I don't know. You know how WWE is, they control you.
Yeah.
They want to say, are you coachable? But will you let us control you? And
And he's not going to let that happen. Yeah,
no.
and it's interesting. Like he was the youngest ever, 18 years old, to be signed, and they gave up on him pretty quick. So I mean, whoever it is, Bruce or maybe Dr. Tom at the point. I mean, whoever it is that was coaching him and trying to lead him, they knew right then and there this guy's, because they never brought him back except for here and there for like a dark match. But they were like, okay,
They did sign him though at one point. They did sign him at
again after that.
Yeah, around 2010. I'll look it up. When
So they
were gonna
thought
bring
that
him
he
back,
had.
to see he was brought back. He was in FCW.
Oh, right. You're
Yeah,
right, because they do have a clip of him in FCW. They show it on there. You're right.
yeah,
So they thought that he had grown up at some point, but then obviously they realized he hadn't, and they gave up on him again.
yeah. Because there was one time it kind of pissed me off. There was a Raw in Calgary and a SmackDown in Kelowna, but for the Raw in Calgary, Ted like showed up just before the Raw starts, and they were thinking of having me in like a dark match, but I totally understand it. They ended up going with Ted and Harry, and they had an amazing match. I don't blame them, by the way. I
Yeah.
was just obviously disappointed, but they are the Hart family member, and they'd wrestled each other, and I know they blew them away. Then a couple years later, he had a tag match against the Bashams on SmackDown, and um, yeah, it was sometime after that he was signed.
So they were you're right, because the FCW, obviously he was a part of developmental, so they thought he could do something with them again. Obviously the potential is there, the talent's there. He's a great wrestler, and he couldn't mentally clear it. And they're being nice, saying he's not coachable. I mean, they're basically saying he's nuts. And I was listening to Conan. There was, I guess, it was a mailbag episode of his K100 podcast, and they were mentioning like who's some of the craziest wrestler, and he like stopped and said Teddy Hart's the craziest guy he's ever met, and that's like Conan saying that. So I mean, that's a lot. So there's something there that's just he's nutty guy.
I think in ECW though he could have existed because they didn't run that much, and kind of they would him showing up late and stuff. That
Well,
would
look, MLW. He was in MLW for a long time, for a few years. I mean, they ran not that often, but they ran a decent amount. I mean, he's the tag champ or middleweight champ. I mean, they were well thought of there, and he was well
They put out
positioned in
two
MLW.
statements against him, though. Did you notice that? Twice, 2 weeks in a row in the Observer, they wanted to put on the record that he wasn't welcome back or something.
Wow, I didn't notice that. Wow. So obviously they fell apart, but for a few years there, Court Bauer and Teddy Hart must have had a decent relationship because he was there. So it's one of those things where you almost think like I could be the guy to correct him, or I think that he's grown up, and it's just not the case.
I think though now I don't think he really did anything that bad in MLW, and I can tell you I saw him 2 times in 2019. I haven't been with him in person since 2019, but for the Philadelphia Royal Rumble weekend,
Yeah.
hanging out with him. And then he came and wrestled me that August. And neither time did he smoke any weed at all. He was smoking cigars only and said he had finished weed. And he had a few drinks, but he didn't get drunk. So to me, that was showing that he was still with MLW, I think, at that time too. I'm not sure. Maybe by August he wasn't. But I think maybe I don't know if he fucked up with MLW or not, but I think probably the main reason they aren't bringing him back is because of they don't want the heat. But they only run so infrequently. I don't think it would have been that big of a deal. I know he told me he had some sort of issue with them though, because they wanted you to arrive the day before, but they weren't paying extra for that or something. And
Oh,
he was telling me that he had some issue over that. So I don't know if that had to do with their falling out or what. But I don't remember hearing there was ever some incident in MLW between them. I don't know if you have.
I don't know what the falling out was, but with Teddy, you can kind of assume that he he just wouldn't play ball or wouldn't do what they want him to do. I could see though them wanting the person there the day before because they don't want to deal with the travel problems of, oh shit, this person's not in town yet. Do we have a show? We have a TV taping, or we have the whatever fusion taping going on or YouTube taping. So you want the guy in town, but I could see him just from the documentary itself just being giving him a hard time, and from seeing him at the ROH show years ago and just him getting released from WWE twice. It just I could see him being a malcontent. I could see him being a problem for whatever reason.
One thing Rene Dupree brought up to me too. I just want to say that when Ted was hired, it was very impressive saying that he was hired at 18 or whatever,
Yeah, yep,
because they weren't doing that at that time. And it was much harder to get a WWE job at that time because WCW had just gone out of business. ECW didn't exist. There was a lot of talent looking for jobs. Now it's very, very easy, and they got the whole development system and stuff. But Rene Dupree brought up to me a couple days ago that he thinks he was actually the youngest signed by WWE. So any smart
really.
marks could do the research. Yeah, he Rene says he was younger than
He
Ted.
was 18 when I thought Rene Dupree was signed when he was 19. I could be completely wrong on that, but
Yeah,
he would know better than me, obviously.
yeah,
But
he will let the fans put that in there, but according to Rene, he was the youngest, and of course Harry. I remember they signed him right out of high school. They actually that's why I was baffled that they never really made use of Harry. Supposedly he made a shit ton for his last run, where they only had him in the one dark match for the 7 months. Apparently that was his biggest contract with them, from what I understand. But like they wanted him so badly that I remember like it was literally they just wanted him to finish high school and we're going to sign you right away. And at that time they were making everyone go to OVW, but they were going to put him right on the roster. But then they debuted him in a pull apart.
weird.
And then,
But I guess the Hart name. I mean, and obviously his talent too. But that carries a lot of weight. He would have been a third generation Hart in the WWF. So I mean that, and obviously Harry ends up being that. But
yeah,
they had a lot into him, and obviously the Hart family name, like he even says, I've been trying to impress Bret Hart for 10 years. Obviously, that carries a lot of weight. Bret carries a lot of weight, and just the Hart name in general, starting with Stu and going down to Bret and Owen. I mean, that name is synonymous and huge with the wrestling business, and that's kind of why he has all those lackeys. People thought like, hey, if I'm following around Teddy, he must have connections with Bret and everybody else.
yeah, and as I said, I hope Harry gets another run. But that's the other thing that you notice with his lackeys. You could tell in the footage where she's at the convenience store, or whatever, with Ted. She is so proud to be with like a Hart family member, and I'm talking about Samantha
Yeah,
Fibbler, and like the camera's following her, and before this, she was a single mother stripping. So you could tell that like she was fully into this too, and like into him for being a Hart and all that.
yeah,
And just sadly, for whatever reason, it all fell apart. And I hope she's not dead, but you never know. Maybe she pissed off the wrong people. Maybe, as you said, something happened to her when she was let out of jail with that group of people. Maybe the reason why she changed her look was someone was after her for something.
yep.
You never know. She had the one incident in the house of that other woman. If you mess with the wrong people that are connected, you could be in serious shit.
Yeah, and who knows? Maybe, and I'm completely speculating, but change her look if somebody's looking for her. Then the person's waiting for her as she gets out of jail. She tries to make a phone call, it doesn't go through, and the person takes her. I mean, I'm speculating, but I mean, who knows that that could have happened? We just don't know. And obviously, the filmmaker didn't give two shits to even look into it. So, I mean, we won't know. But I know that there's an army out there of her friends and her sister, and there's like trying to find out, even if it's she passed away, they're trying to look for closure. They're trying to see if they can get an ending to the story. As sad as that might be, that she might be dead, odds are that it's not looking good because the missing persons case, you haven't find them within 48 hours. They say your odds decrease by each day that the person is alive. And this has been a few years now. But at least they give the family some closure, give her friends some closure. But the documentarian, again, I'm just pissed about it. It's like he didn't even care. He didn't even care to do that. He closed up his books, and Teddy Hart was innocent. He wanted Teddy Hart to be brought to justice, and it didn't happen. So it's
Ibsen
crazy.
coming out with a fat 18 was when Renee was signed too. Um, and I'm
Oh, I
pretty
wonder
sure,
when we got
yeah,
to find out the exact day. You know what I mean? Like as far as like how old was Teddy the day? You know what I mean? 18 in 2 days. What was Renee 18 in one day? We need to find that out.
and now with them signing some really young people, it might even
Yeah,
be.
did you see they signed Thea Hall, I think her name is, from NXT. She's a part of Chase University. She may now be the youngest because I'm pretty sure she was 17
Yeah,
and they signed her, and she's on TV already. So she's either 17 or just turned 18, but very signed. And they signed this cheerleader named Gabby Butler, at a very young age. I'm not sure if she's 18 or not, or if she's older, but it just seemed like they're definitely going back to now signing a lot of younger athletes
and
with
it's
the
always,
NIL.
yeah. I just find it funny because like, and I'm sorry Ted will probably watch this, but I don't actually believe he ever had any money because if you look at the exact amount of time he was in WWE, it wasn't that long. And like, where else does he have his money from? Honestly,
Parents, I guess, would give it to
yeah.
him, but they obviously didn't because he was slumming with everybody else.
Or did he get an inheritance? I know that the dad in Calgary, he had told me he did have a very fancy house in Calgary that the dad had bought for him and for the students to come live in, and it had a pool and stuff. And
Probably a bad idea.
I'll tell you a really really funny story. I was there one night with Ted and Jim Neidhart, and at this time he had this girlfriend named Daniela, who I would say this girl put all of those girls to shame, all of them. She was absolutely gorgeous, and she was like 18. Ted would have been like in his early 20s at this point, but she had, I think they were all 18, but for whatever reason, the the father had heard, one of the kids' fathers had heard that they were over at Ted Hart's house. So the father comes knocking on the door,
Oh shit.
and Jim Neidhart's like, "What the hell did you invite me here for, Ted?"
Yeah,
It was
wow.
just funny because he's like, "Don't get me in shit."
He's gonna get the anvil in trouble. Yeah.
Yeah, so I believe that he went downstairs and the dad came, and Ted's a good talker and stuff. He really wasn't doing anything wrong, but the father just thought it was weird. Why is this girl coming to this guy's house? But it was funny to see Jim Neidhart's reaction, like, Ted, what the fuck did you invite me here for?
Yeah, really. The other thing, though, that I noticed from the documentary is if you look in the ring of who he's wrestling in some of the matches, so they're saying he's a murderer. You know, they're really putting him in a bad light. And he has a match with Davy Boy Jr. He's having matches with the Young Bucks. He's having matches with Brian Cage. Like, I don't know, like if something doesn't add up as far as like these guys obviously wrestling him are of a certain ilk. They're wrestling him knowing that he's like a murderer. So come on, that part of it, it was so ridiculous that to me I was like, come on, like those guys obviously wouldn't be in the ring with him if he would murdered somebody. You know what I mean? They would want no part of him. So uh,
I
that just
honestly
kind of
don't
rubbed me the wrong way too.
see him murdering anybody being around him.
But
Yeah,
you think Harry would want anything to do with him if he was murdered somebody? You're like, oh yeah, well let's wrestle. You know, like come on,
and
they
come
would want nothing to do with him.
maybe the reason why they hired him back the second time was because I think it was around the same time they Harry was already there, I think, but TJ and Natty were there, and maybe they thought, let's put them in a group. They'll maybe we
Yeah, it
can,
was going to be the new Hart Foundation. Yeah.
but like if they were with those good influences, maybe it could work. Because he
Yep.
could have made it, honestly, if he has extreme talent. If he had been given the opportunity and it would have been able to handle the opportunity, he could have been huge.
He's one of those guys too. You put him on a card and you say, you go and do whatever you want. He steals the show pretty much. I mean, you're just like in awe of some of the shit that he does. And you're like, man, how come this guy didn't make it further? How come this guy's not main eventing WrestleMania? That might be a little too far, but you know what I mean? How come this guy's not in WrestleMania? How come this guy's not in WWE? And it all stems back down to his attitude and just the way he handles himself and conducts his business.
From ability wise, though, and
He's
charisma
awesome.
wise, he
He's
put
awesome.
CM
Yeah.
Punk to shame. That's my honest opinion. CM Punk can't do any of the flips. And like CM Punk has been trained in all those MMA moves. I don't know where the hell Ted learned it all, but
Yeah, he's
Ted
a
knows
he's
it all.
accomplished MMA. Yeah, and obviously, if you go back to that fight, Teddy Hart supposedly destroyed Punk, but obviously Teddy Hart is for whatever somehow some way he knows submissions, he knows grappling. He's actually could be a decent fighter if he wanted to be.
Yeah, and I've seen him in street fights, and he's not only like good, but like he's fearless no matter how big the person is and stuff. And I told this once in my news, like one time I was just driving with him and I didn't know that this guy was being chased by the cops. I thought he had heat with this guy, but I guess he saw that the cops were running after somebody. And he's like, Devin, follow this guy. We followed this guy. We pulled off to the side. We were literally jumping up and over fences, through alleys. It was like a real life movie chase. And
Yeah,
Ted, I was slow. I was like 280. I was still keeping up, but I was like a good 30 seconds, 45 seconds behind. Ted ends up getting this guy down, and he had a blade and about $2,000 cash on him. But then the cops came. And at this point, I still thought this guy owes Ted money or something.
right,
I
right.
didn't even see the cops. And then the cops were thanking him and everything. And I don't know if this is just Ted saying something, but he told them they ended up getting a commendation. But it was funny after the cops came because they were the ones that did the full search and found the money in the blade. Ted's like, I wish we known he had $2,000 on him.
Right, he was going to steal it. Yeah.
But like that's what it's like being around Ted. You'd have adventures like that. You never know what could happen. Or as you said, what you saw him do at that Ring of Honor show, I've seen him do in a busy grocery store. He'd be like, Devin, hold my jacket or whatever. And he'd be wearing his pants and he would just start doing backflips, like all down,
Wow, what the hell? Wow,
yeah,
all right.
just to like
Weird.
attract
Yeah.
attention.
Very weird. So you just don't know like what he's thinking about mentally. Obviously, he probably needs some counseling or whatever, or some help. It just seems like who the hell knows what he's thinking about some of these times. And obviously, him and women or relationships, I should say, don't uh, mesh well together.
Another funny thing about him at grocery stores, he'd always be like, it's not stealing if it doesn't leave the store. And you go grab an apple.
Oh
Because
man,
as we said, he never had any money. He never had any
yeah,
money for
yeah.
food. So like, let's go to the grocery store, walk around, grab an apple, or he'd know someone that works that would only
Would
scan.
he wear his wrestling attire in the
Yeah, but no one ever said anything, and he could talk himself out of any situation. So yeah, I don't know. What do you think his future is? I don't know. I'll be honest. I hope that he could maybe get something out of this to at least make money on the independent scenes and stay out of trouble, because I believe for what the incidents that he's been found guilty for, according to all I know, he's paid the price for that. He's spent some jail time. He's been on parole.
Yep.
From what I understand, he finished his parole in Virginia. Then he had to go to Texas to finalize his parole or something. And then now he's going to be able to go back out of the country and stuff. So I think he's paid the price for
And
what
I
he.
know when I interviewed him years ago, he was in Texas. He was on house arrest. He said he couldn't leave the house. So I know that obviously he was having a problem, and he was serving his sentence. So you almost have to think like, okay, he's not going to get signed anywhere. There's just no way. But there's a bunch of independent companies, and I was looking online just to see what people's thoughts of the documentary were, and a lot of people were saying like, "Oh, I'm interested in booking him now," or "I think he's going to get booked now." I feel like he's more popular now. WWE helped produce the documentary, so like, not that he'll go back to WWE, but that has some juice, and that gives him juice as far as getting bookings on the independent. So I see no contracts in the future, but I see plenty of independent states starting with this one booking in Florida, and it probably more like you said, XPW. I could see GCW booking him again. I mean, I could see a bunch of places booking him.
Yeah, especially since AEW and WWE are literally signing up all the talent. And the big thing against him was the Samantha Fiddler thing.
And he's innocent, so like you can't hang that on him anymore. You just can't.
And I think everyone realizes that he doesn't have the money to order a hit on her or
Right.
anything like that.
Yeah.
This guy literally has to rely on people for everything.
And just because he's saying, "Oh, she's not my girlfriend. We didn't do this. We didn't do that," he's lying, right? For what purpose? Because he was done with the girl and he doesn't want to talk about her. So he's just like, you know what I mean? He's just like almost like wiping himself clean of it. And who knows why? Like liars lie. Oh, he's hiding something. Nah, he's just lying. You know what I mean? He's not hiding anything. He's just lying. He literally
Just
was in
like Virgil,
California.
million
He,
dollar man say that about Virgil. Virgil lies when it's easier to just tell the truth.
yeah, yeah. He's just he doesn't obviously doesn't want to answer the question from the documentarian. He'll just lie and give him a bullshit answer. He'll ask him one thing, he'll tell him one thing. He'll just say, "Oh no, we didn't work together," because obviously he doesn't want to talk about it. So he'll just lie and move
And
on.
he forgets that they were being filmed because that's just his memory. But
Yep.
the other thing that I think they got mixed up, didn't he say she went to a boxing or an MMA place, got punched in the face, and then didn't want to do it, which I can understand because a lot of people don't want to do it after they've been hit in the face. It
Yes.
hurts.
Yes.
It's
Yep.
not like wrestling. Then they show wrestling footage. It's like, it looks like she's pretty tough. It's like, nah, you can't compare getting whacked in the nose or whacked in the eye or the temple to taking a bump.
That was a little bit of Fugazi editing there too, because if you look at it, they're talking about MMA and boxing and how she got punched, and they're showing pro wrestling and they're showing the Team Vision Dojo stuff and her adapting well to wrestling. Yeah, maybe she liked wrestling or whatever, but they said about the MMA stuff about her getting punched, so that was a little off too.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, thank God she didn't get into MMA because, yes, Ted is a good fighter, but, like, I don't know who he's ever trained in MMA.
Right, right. I mean, you got to go to yeah.
Go off. What do the parents say? Yeah, go off and start fighting. You're in your
So
late 20s with
So,
kids.
I was watching Bellator. I love Bellator. Vadim Nemkov is number one Sherdog ranked light heavyweight in the world. Trains with Fedor, the greatest fighter of all time, the greatest heavyweight of all time. Trains with Moldavsky, former Bellator heavyweight champion. So it's like, okay, he's a trained fighter. What does he do when he needs to be Corey Anderson? He goes to a very accomplished American top team school. So it's like, if you want to be that high level of fighter and you're going to another training camp to learn how to defend takedowns, to wrestle and fight. I don't think if you're an amateur fighter, you're going to go to Teddy Hart and learn how to fight and be a good fighter. You know what I mean? Like if you're at a certain level, you're here, you got to go to a certain good school. Even Nemkov, who's at this highest level, goes to a good school because he knows, like, if I want to be a better fighter, I got to go to a good trainer. You don't just go to some random person, a guy who's a pro wrestler, and go, oh, I mean, maybe she's so naive, she thought that was the case, but I have a hard time believing that too. It's like she really thought she was going to be an MMA fighter training with Teddy. Like, that doesn't even make sense to me. It doesn't compute.
And the other thing is, WWE wouldn't have hired her if she was an ex stripper because I highly doubt it because they seem to really do background checks on people these days. And even people that have been in like semi porns that don't like show intercourse, I've heard that they've had issues with in the past. So I don't know unless you're playing a hoe on the Godfather's hoe train if they've ever actually hired a stripper that has gone on to have success in WWE just because they become world famous stars and they don't want people searching that stuff up. But maybe you can correct
Yeah.
me. You
No,
know,
I don't know. It doesn't seem like it seems like, not that they're prude or whatever, but it just seems like that might be against what they're looking for. Like they're looking for like, hey, this girl was an actress, this girl was a model, this girl was a soap opera star or whatever, or this girl was a cheerleader athlete, this girl was a famous gymnast. Like it just seems like they're looking for certain types. Unfortunately, I don't know if like, hey, ex stripper, people that work there might have a bad stigma on it. Even though to me it is what it is. I mean, if she's got to do what she's got to do to make money, that's her right. But it seems like WWE is very prude in certain aspects.
And I suspect, honestly, that I liked Selena's job as my manager overall when she managed the Blood Hunter, but I suspect when she had her tryout, maybe one of the reasons that I could think of why she might not have been hired, because she's a lot more talented than a lot of the girls I've seen in there, is because
Oh
of the
yeah,
sexy wrestling tapes. That would be my just thought, because other than that, she had everything. But
and
like,
I was talking to Dr. Tom, and I've talked to other people that worked at WWE too. They said you never know like what would be a black mark and what they might not like. I think it was Disco Inferno answered questions incorrectly, and that was when in '97 when they were going to bring him in to be a part of the honky tonk band gimmick instead of rockabilly was going to be him. He answered question wrong. They didn't like that, so you never know. It's like, did they say something wrong? Did they do something wrong? I remember. Damn it, I forget who it was. Somebody cut Sheamus. I don't remember who the wrestler was. They cut Sheamus in line in catering, and one of the agents noticed, and Sheamus didn't say anything. He kind of didn't care, but one of the agents noticed, and that was a black mark, black check against him. The guy, and it wasn't the guy did it on purpose. He was being a dope, but didn't realize he was cutting a guy in catering that was a known star. Somebody took food from somebody else's plate. They didn't realize it, being stupid. Like all these things that are black marks, you don't know they're black marks. Somebody with Vince, I forget the story, but somebody was rude to him or he didn't like the way that they responded. Wimpy handshake, smoking. Somebody's
taking
a spit
Booker
talker.
T's energy drink from the drinks.
Yes,
Sure, you heard
yes.
about that one.
Yes, yes. So, like, you'd never know. Somebody took the last water. Somebody took the last Coke. Somebody, that was a young guy that was one of the extras, took like the last remaining food. He didn't realize that it was for somebody else. One of the stars came over and the food was gone. And the star mentioned it to one of the agents, like, what the hell happened to the food? They looked and one of the extras had food. Why the hell is this guy taking food? You never know.
Yeah, and actually, I didn't know during my early tryouts, and Lance Storm kind of smartened me up. And I thought back thinking, like, I was hired when I was eventually hired at 26, but I started getting tryouts at 24. But he mentioned something like at the monitor, if you sit in the front, even if like there's no one there at the start, and because you're an extra, you just sit at the front and stay there, you can get heat from that.
Wow.
And also,
See?
even he said, don't even eat catering if you go back there. He said, there's so much crap they'll get mad at you for in catering.
Yep.
It's not worth it. But the sitting at the front was definitely one that I was guilty of twice. And it made me think, could that have been it? Because as an extra, you're just like, well, there's nobody here. I guess I'll just sit on the chairs in front of the monitor. But
Yep.
in
And
reality,
I've heard too that they told the guys that were doing dark matches, don't do this, don't do that, don't do certain moves like you might take away from later on the show. And there was a couple guys that were working and they did all their spots. They got all their shit in. They got to the back. Tremendous amount of heat for that. Like they were trying to get over and it got over with their live crowd. Didn't get over in the back.
well, now I don't even think they have dark matches with independent wrestlers, or
I
it's like,
don't know. I haven't heard of that in a while because it seems like all like the dark matches or the main event matches. It's either guys that they don't use like Akira Tozawa or somebody that's used infrequently, or it's guys from NXT that they want to get a look from.
yeah, and now if they, I think they'll give. When I was there, if they didn't use you, you would just sit there and do nothing. So it would really suck if you were excited for this tryout for months and then
Yep.
you do nothing. But now it seems like they have like a little tryout for everybody, and then if they like you, they send you to NXT for a week. But it wasn't like that uh, back when, like in the early 2000s and even in the late 90s. If you were lucky, you'd have a dark match. Then if they like seeing you in the dark match, they'd hire you.
Yep.
So, anyways, John, this went longer than I thought, but I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing for Teddy. As I said, I don't. It's better for to have NBC's Peacock and WWE do a documentary on you
Yep.
that, in the end, kind of clears you.
Exonerated him. Yeah. Cleared his name. Yeah.
So I think it showed a
Cleared his
lot.
name from the one issue with Samantha, obviously. The other
Yeah,
issues are still wide open with Machiko and Faye and the other girl. Yeah. But
but
yeah.
he's not going to jail over
No.
those.
Nope.
So my thing where this would have been really bad for him is if this had brought out a new investigation, then he ends up going to jail. But in the end, he already had the heat from all the other stuff. And yeah, he's still going to pay for that heat. But when
The
your
only
popularity outwears the heat,
Yep. But the only other thing is too, you could say, what an asshole. He doesn't care about the fact that the girl's missing. So that's another thing. Like you could say, like he's such an asshole that he doesn't even care, like what happened to this girl. But obviously, bad breakup. He was done with her, and he moved on, and it seemed like she moved on too. But to me, that's the only other thing. Is like, what an asshole. He doesn't even care what happened to this poor girl.
he could have. And again, I'm just giving him the benefit of the doubt. And I'm completely neutral on this. I've had my ups and downs with Ted over the years as well. I would say we're neutral now, but we've had our issues stemming from similar stuff that some of these people have been through.
Yep.
Borrowing stuff, and then it just. But whatever, it's I don't harp
Yeah,
on.
and I'm not the female stuff. I'm not defending him at all. But as far as like the fiddler, him being a murderer, I feel like the documentarian just wanted himself to be on air, and it was like the documentary was almost like about him. Hey, the Freddie Crutch story, like you know
I
what I mean? It
hated him
wasn't.
by the end of it. I
Yes.
hated
Yep.
him.
Yep. He to me, he's the biggest culprit and he's the biggest villain, even more so than Teddy. I know that the speaking out stuff and the horrible stuff that's associated with him and him allegedly with these women, that stuff is terrible. But the fact that this documentary made the documentary somehow about him, but it's the Teddy Hart story, is just horrible and like what an egomaniac. And then the fact that he's saying case closed and that he's done with it, and he literally symbolizes it by getting all his stuff together, putting it in a box and closing the box, and like this one's done when the girl is still clearly missing and you did nothing to help that case. That's an asshole move. And like Teddy's innocent of that for sure. We know that he's been exonerated, but this guy, like, he didn't care about that. He only cared about selling this fucking thing to Peacock.
And the other funny thing is, the last thing I'll put, because I was offended as a shoot interview. My shoot interview with Ted has over 50,000 hits. They brought on this guy that has just over 10,000 hits in an online interview with him that like questioned him about the fiddler thing, where he was on that date, which as it turns out, they knew where he was in the end anyways. So
Yep.
why even put this part in?
Yeah,
He
that
doesn't.
was bad too because the guy was trying to be a sleuth. He was trying to be an investigator, like, and obviously the sister was feeding him some questions to say to Teddy. But the whole thing was, I know you're not a wrestling guy, but like, why didn't you look that up? Oh, Teddy, you're lying. You're lying. You're lying. You knew where she was. You know, what about this? What about that? What about the Jaguar? What about the passport? None of that matters. The fact that he's in fucking California and she's in Florida. Like the guy should have did some due diligence too. And to put that in there only for the fact that you're teasing the fact that Teddy Hart's a murderer was low. That was pretty low.
That particular interviewer, I won't name his name, but he's a cross-eyed piece of shit.
I
That
have no idea who he is. I don't know.
he's a piece of shit that no one knows about, and he
I know
definitely
he's not a wrestling guy
he
though.
deserves to be down for sure. Not the documentary maker, but the clip where they showed the
Yeah.
blasting Ted.
Yeah, I have no idea who he is. Not associated with wrestling. I have no idea who he is.
Yeah, he is associated with wrestling.
Oh, he is.
Oh,
I
yeah.
thought he. Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
then he should have known that Teddy was wrestling in California. Look it up. Do some research.
Yeah. Anyways, John, I really appreciate it. And there's a lot of great interviews that we just posted with John on this channel with the Fixers and Necro Butcher. Tom Pritchard just did one where he talked about Ted Hart tonight. So there's a lot of great stuff. So we appreciate having you, having your content. It's always great interviews. And I'll let you shut this down. Thanks again.
You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Two Man Power Trip. Check out the website, tmptempire.com. Check out Patreon, patreon.com/tmptempire. Check out Pro Wrestling Tees. They got a big Black Friday sale. Check out the two-man power trip of wrestling store. But thank you, everybody, for tuning in here. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot interviews.